It's another threesome, folks, and we're getting naughty. We're going to get under the sheets and delve into the Warriors. It's a sausage party, folks. You ready?
Wow.
Not
Okay.
for that.
This is
What a
Locked
way
On
to
Warriors.
start. Okay.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're available on every podcast platform. Joining Dieter Kurtenbach and myself today is Connor Letourneau of the San Francisco Chronicle. You can follow Dieter on Twitter at Dieter, Connor Letourneau on Twitter at CON_CHRON, Con_Cron, and me at Dog Surf Roadshow. You know, Dieter, since we did the show yesterday, I always try to check out NBA Twitter. It's always a hodgepodge of some interesting stuff, a lot of crazy stuff.
Why are you doing that to yourself?
Because that's where a lot of the fans are, man. I want to keep my finger on the pulse of what they're talking about. But
here's what I know about NBA Twitter. I had 4 Kevin Durant fans. I thought that Kevin Durant had said something about me this morning because I had 4 Kevin Durant fans in my DMs being like, "Go blank yourself" and this and that. And I'm like, "Oh, what did KD do now?" Unprovoked, he's just back. That's NBA Twitter to me. So not really quite sure why you would willingly delve into those waters, but more power to you, buddy.
Well, Dieter, you consider yourself a man of logic. It would be unfair to generalize all of NBA Twitter as utterly incompetent and hateful and illogical. Man, but you're right.
At a certain point, if half of the water is filled with crap, I'm starting to wonder if we should be drinking it.
We got chum in the water from just toxicity that's coming from
this
NBA
is
Twitter.
Beside the point. I'm sorry for interrupting. Continue with your original.
It's okay. The point is that there's a lot of people criticizing Steve Kerr. I think he deserves some criticism, not the amount I'm hearing. I don't want to call for his head. That's ridiculous. But I want to start off with that. Is there any criticism warranted toward Kerr, and how much? What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think so. I think so, but I think a lot of it right now is a feeling out process that any coach would have to be navigating. I mean, when you're dealing with injuries to key players, you need to mix and match. You need to see how different lineups look together. There's going to be a learning curve there for any coach. And so I think you need to give Steve a little bit of grace. That being said, I do think some of the criticism for Steve is warranted. I've said many times before, I think Steve's a phenomenal coach. I think he's one of the best, probably 2 or 3 coaches in the league. But if you're going to pinpoint a shortcoming of his in-games X's and O's isn't elite, in my opinion. His strength is really getting a group to come together, knowing how to put people in positions to succeed, knowing how to handle egos and all those different types of things. But, so
95% of being a coach in the NBA.
Yes, exactly. I don't think Steve would be a great college coach because college requires definitely a different skill set that he doesn't necessarily possess, but his skill set translates very well to the NBA. But in terms of if a game's on the line and you had to give me a coach who I want on the sideline, Steve wouldn't be at the top of my list. And that's not a huge criticism of him. It's just not his biggest strength. And, that's why he's good in criticism because he struggles in those moments. And that's always kind of been the case, I think. But
how do you juxtapose that point with the fact that the Warriors run some of the best after timeout plays in the NBA? Like how is it that Steve can be a deficient X's and O's coach, and yet when there's a very clear cut point of here are the X's, here are the O's, this one's going to go this way, that one's going to go that way, the Warriors always seem to get baskets right underneath the hoop or wide open looks for 3. I mean, I get where people are coming from when they say, like, late game execution for this team has been bad. Late game execution oftentimes is sort of pointed to at the coach, but I don't know how you're supposed to execute in late game scenarios when you don't have a wing that you want the ball in their hands. Like, I don't know how it's when you have Kevin Durant, you're a genius late game coach. And when you don't have Kevin Durant, when you're doing Andrew Wiggins and Andrew Wiggins has decided that the free throw line is lava, like, you're not going to look like a good X's and O's coach. I don't necessarily think that he should be devoid from criticism. I'm just not sure what criticism actually lands. Like what should be running the score 125 points per play game or the gameplay. Like they started the fourth quarter against Minnesota, and I mentioned this on yesterday's show, but I kind of want to hammer this point home because it's actually more absurd now than when I said it. Like I've sat on it for a while and been like, oh my, that was actually quite ridiculous. They started the fourth quarter in a game that they needed to make a run. It was Curry, it was Jordan Poole, it was Jonathan Kuminga, Damian Lee, and Juan Toscano Anderson. Like, yikes-a-roni, man.
What can you do?
That's my point. Like, how are you supposed to make 4 guys who have been on 2-way deals or like last guy on the rosters and like major contributors? How are you supposed to make a 19-year-old and a mercurial 22-year-old? How are you? Like, I feel like it's a pretty tall task. And oh, by the way, the one guy that you can rely on every day isn't so physically imposing that he can shoot over defenses. So, unless he wants to shoot from half court, which, you know what, honestly, not a bad idea at this juncture.
One of the things that I think makes Steve a good coach, he's a really good collaborator, and he doesn't have a lot of ego,
right?
And he takes feedback in game situations from his assistant coaching staff, which his assistant coaching staff is very qualified. He has, Ron Adams, who's one of the best defensive gurus in the NBA.
Love
he has
him.
Mike Brown, who I think was one of the more underrated head coaches in the NBA when he was a head coach in the NBA. He has Kenny Atkinson, who I think has proven himself in Brooklyn and in other assistant coaching stops. And so, he's a guy who, if you watch closely, like he's constantly conferring with his assistants about how to handle situations. And a lot of these decisions don't necessarily come from his brain. I know that specifically Mike Brown is a bit of a mastermind when it comes to the rotation, the substitution patterns, and those types of things. He actually literally outlines on a card before the game the substitution pattern. That's his job. He's also the head of the defense now. So Mike Brown does a lot, and Steve also does a lot. But it's when you're criticizing someone, you have to understand, like, not all this stuff is directly coming from him. He is the head coach, so he's going to be the one blamed. But there's a lot of people, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
And it's right that the buck stops with him, as Connor notes. Like, the buck has to stop with the head coach. That's why he's paid more than these other guys. That's why it's not 4 head coaches or 4 assistant head coaches all working together to form a Megatron situation. Like, it's Steve has to ultimately make the call. The buck stops with him. At the same time, again, like, just a lot of the criticism of Steve that I see out there in the cesspool is basically it all comes back to this for me. It just seems as if people want the Warriors to run pick and roll on every single damn play. They just want to run pick and roll Steph Curry every single damn play. And anyone who is still pushing that out, just shut up. Like, you're wasting everybody's time. Like, the system does work, but you need good players to do the system. And this is kind of goes back to the point I made yesterday, Cyrus, with this team is kind of front running. Like, when you have Andrew Wiggins, who refuses to step up to a number 2 role, but is really cool with the number 3 or number 4. When you have Jordan Poole, who I think is just kind of on the roller coaster right now. I just think it's a lull. But when things are going great, when the vibes are good, Jordan Poole's way up there. He'll give you 30 on a night you might not necessarily need it. But he's also 22, and so it's to be expected. Like, everybody flows in the same direction. Everything is really going great. Like, there's not much struggle when the system is clicking and the personnel is there and it's all flowing and it's beautiful. And when there's a little bit of gunk in the gears, it looks really bad. But the system ultimately, I know that the margin of separation between the Warriors and the rest of the NBA with that system has minimized by the year, or at least, it's been almost negated, but it's still an advantage. And the alternative is not viable. Full stop. It's not viable. And I just don't understand how this conversation's still happening with that. And
as long as you have Steph Curry, you're not going to change that system. It's really,
exactly.
It's really that simple. Steph is the system. You don't mess with that. One last thing about Steve. I think it's really easy to forget that he had never coached at any level before 2014. And yes, he's a very smart guy. Yes, he had been in and around the NBA in a bunch of different capacities, but he had never coached at any level. And so there's going to be a learning curve that is prolonged. There's going to be certain little holes in his repertoire that are going to come to the surface here and there. And I think you really saw it last season with his handling of James Wiseman. He had never had a a high-level rookie, a highly touted early draft pick before, and he really struggled with that. Yeah, he really struggled with that, and I think, he learned from that. He's done a much better job this season with Kuminga, but even with Kuminga, I think he struggled a couple different times in terms of his messaging publicly and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes to a lack of experience in those departments. So I think you need to, it's easy to just assume he's been around forever because he's accomplished so much in such a little amount of time. But you need to, when you're judging Steve, you need to keep that in mind.
Yep. And when we come back, we're going to obviously delve into this a little more because I have a few angles I want to present to you, gentlemen. But first, let's talk about a really long-time sponsor of this program, BetOnline.
Mm-hmm.
It's where you go to get the lines. It's where you go to make your bets. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both the pro and college hoops levels. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. By the way, the Warriors are playing the Mavericks again tonight. This time they're in Dallas.
Dallas 2.5. Money line is plus 115 for the Warriors. Total is 219.5.
I like that money line. What do you think? I feel like the Warriors are there. They might, when they're pissed off like this, I could be wrong, but yeah, exactly.
The question is, do they have the arsenal to actually make it happen?
Yeah, and Clay might play, which would help tremendously, but that's the line right there. And Dieter found that at betonline.net. It remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. betonline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. betonline.net, where the game starts.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts is free and available wherever you get podcasts. Connor Letourneau can be found on Twitter at @con_Cron. Dieter Kurtenbach is much easier to follow on Twitter at Dieter. No offense, Connor. And I'm not that easy myself at Dogsurf Roadshow. I wanted to bring up one play that I have not seen recently. And this is where I feel like sometimes you can point the finger at Kerr a little bit. There wasn't a very effective offensive play that when I was watching it, I thought, wow, this could be the beginning of something amazing. And that was the Steph split action with Kuminga. Basically, it was like a decoy screen where Steph basically just set Kuminga up for success because Steph always draws double teams. And I think this is where the pick and roll thing might be coming into play a little bit. I don't think it works for most players, but I was seeing it work tremendously with Kuminga just because he's such an explosive force. Why do you think they're not running set screens, set plays for Kuminga more to set him up for success? That's one thing I'm noticing. Am I just seeing something that...
Do you want to run the offense through somebody who can't shoot from the mid-range and can only do it at the hoop? I mean, that's the argument there.
It was working, though. That's the reason why, and I haven't seen it lately.
Well, you saw it, and it stopped working. I mean, eventually teams get wise. They were doing that against Dallas, right? That was the game where it was noted. Well, Dallas is one of the best defenses in the NBA, and it didn't take long for them to realize it's split action. I noted this a couple of weeks ago. The Warriors were going to have to get a little bit more creative than just running split action again and again and again, because the rest of the NBA is aware that was pretty much the only move in the arsenal that they had. Otherwise, it was just sort of this free-flowing, set a screen if you're feeling like it sort of a thing. But in terms of sort of a set play, like I haven't seen the Clay elevator play in a minute, mind you, because Clay hasn't played. But like a lot of the sets, which were so revolutionary is the wrong word, but certainly a little bit different than the way the rest of the league was going. Well, it's been 6 years, 7 years. Teams caught up. Teams know what to recognize. And by the way, when you're running a split action with a Jonathan Kuminga, when you're running a split action with Kevon Looney, you're requiring them to be the point guard. It works a whole lot different when Draymond Green is the man in the post running the split action. That's the play you want. That's the reason the play is in the book. You're doing it with Andrew Bogut. You're doing it with guys who can pass. Jonathan Kuminga, Kevon Looney, I mean, every now and again, but is that your offense? That doesn't feel like a very viable model moving forward. And just holding up the success of, it worked these 2 or 3 times. That doesn't mean it's going to continue to work. And that doesn't mean that on the macro, it's the best move for the Warriors on the basis of it's going to create a lot of turnovers when you have a guy who is not a passer, and Kuminga is simply just not a passer yet. And you have Looney, who at his best is an average passer. You're going to turn the ball over a lot once teams start keying in on stuff like that. You know, Bogut, Draymond, Durant, those guys are brilliant passers. You'll take those plays every time. You want the ball in their hands. You want the ball with those guys distributing. Kuminga, Looney, no, you're just hoping to get away with it, and that's why the Warriors stopped running it.
I think we might have gotten lulled into a little bit of a false sense of security with Kuminga. I mean, I think everyone, myself included, saw that torrid stretch he had and got really excited and was like, "Oh my God, he's going to be amazing!" and he's the future now, and all these things. But the reality is, he is still 19 years old, and he has a lot to learn. And as Dieter touched upon, defenses are going to throw different coverages at him, figure him out, and it's on him to see how he adapts. Now, we're going to see over the course of the rest of the season, how does he adapt? And that's really going to give us a clearer picture of how ready he is for more high-stakes situations. But, I mean, there's been a lot of talk, like he's ready to be a key rotation player in the playoffs right now. I'm not 100% committed to saying that right now because the playoffs are a totally different beast. You need guys who are out there who know what they're freaking doing.
Yep.
And, you need the Andre Iguodalas of the world out there, rounding out your rotation. And I think Kuminga will play in the playoffs, but I'm not sure he'll be as like key of a rotation player as people think.
And along those same lines, like I'm totally in agreement with you here, Connor. Like there was a false sense of security that was built up. He played awesome. He was great in February, almost 15 points per game, 5 rebounds, had almost an assist and a half. He was really good. But that false sense of security also was felt by the Warriors, I think, because Andrew Wiggins averaged fewer points per game than Jonathan Kuminga. Jordan Poole averaged fewer points per game than Jonathan Kuminga. Jonathan Kuminga was the 3rd leading scorer on the Warriors in the month of February. That's not sustainable. He's 19 years old, as Connor brings up, as we should bring up within every 5 sentences when we're talking about Jonathan Kuminga. Like, there's going to be ups and downs. The book is going to start to be developed on this guy, and he has to adjust. And we talked about this time and time again. I mean, the kid's talent is through the roof. So his potential is, in theory, through the roof. But you're dealing with sort of micro stuff here. You're dealing with teams that are locking in on him because apparently, as we have found out over these last couple of games, all you have to do is shut down Jonathan Kuminga, and Andrew Wiggins and Jordan Poole take themselves out of the game for you. I mean, they were over-reliant on a 19-year-old, and looking back on it now, well, damn, that's not a good idea. That seemed like a mistake, all things considered. It was fun. It was interesting. But you're going 25 minutes and getting 15 points per game from Jonathan Kuminga, and I know that 1 or 2 of those came in games where the Warriors were more or less throwing. But yikes-a-roni, man. Like, that's not a viable model for success in the playoffs, having to rely on a 19-year-old who doesn't shoot. I mean, he can, but that's not his game, and he's certainly not getting anything in the mid-range. He's a long-term project. It's great that the floor is where it is, and I think the ceiling is incredibly high. I'm not going to take anything away from him just because he struggled the last couple of games. But are you going to bank? And it looks like they're banking. You're going to bank your season? You're going to bank a year of Steph Curry's prime, of Draymond Green's prime on Jonathan Kuminga having it all figured out at 19 years old? That's a fool's errand, man. A fool's errand.
No, I agree. The only criticism I will levy on Kerr is I feel like some players deserve more minutes. Gary Payton II, for example, I think should be getting 30-plus minutes a night. Jonathan Kuminga,
30-plus minutes, bro.
I mean, that's he can barely run.
Why? He got 27 the last game. He was the only player outside of Looney who was plus 2.
By the way, the last game is really a model that you want to use moving forward.
No, but you look at his stats going back this entire 3 months. He's one of the highest plus minus players on the roster. Every time, the more he plays, the more effective he is, and the better the Warriors are. I want 30-plus minutes. I really think he's worthy of that. Are you talking about
right now, or like when they're fully healthy?
Right now.
Okay.
I just don't see why not. When they're fully healthy, I don't know if you could fit that. Maybe 25. But right now, given how thin they are, And some players need 30-plus minutes to get into a rhythm. Kuminga, for example, in February, with his best month of his career, his short career, he averaged, again, almost 15 points. He was also putting up playing nearly 26 minutes a game. In a game like Minnesota, for example, the last 2 games, which we've kind of been criticizing him for, he was putting in 16, 17. I know he's starting poor, and that's why Kerr has this quick leash on him, but I'm saying maybe hold off on that quick leash and just let these guys play out. I think that's where a lot of people are criticizing Kerr as well with Jordan Poole. For example, last game he had 19 minutes total. Maybe he needs more to get into a groove. We've seen the star players sometimes have slow starts in a game before they light it up in the third and fourth quarters. Your thoughts on that? Can we actually
the last 4 times that Gary Payton II has played more than 20 minutes a game, the Warriors have lost. Just wanted to let you know that.
Fair, but he's been like the one bright spot in those losses, and that's where I mean, again, like look at his plus.
He was the bright spot against Utah on the 9th.
Oh, I don't know that far back.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah.
Peter, I'm a stoner. You can't ask me about like February 9th, dude. Like I got to look this stuff up if you're going to go that far back. But all I'm saying is just from recent history, that's what I'm seeing. And we can talk about this more. We got to first talk about a fantastic sponsor though, which pays or saves you money, and that's Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible.
That's a hell of it.
I know. That was a poor phrasing on my part, but they save you money, and it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning like, is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer. You have to deal with human beings when you could just be at home saving money. You're choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You're limited in options. You have computers. You have phones with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? An example being a Honda Odyssey fuel pump. It's $353 from a chain store, just $216 from Rock Auto. That's an example of where you can save money. And they're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
You are Locked On Warriors, your daily Golden State Warriors podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Warriors your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Connor Letourneau's on Twitter at @con_Cron. Dieter Kurtenbach, you can follow him on Twitter at Dieter, and follow me on Twitter at DogSurfRoadshow. Gentlemen, I want to play this sound. And for the YouTube viewers, you can see the video as well of Jordan Poole during practice yesterday in Dallas. By the way, your colleague, Connor, CJ Holmes, posted a great video of the team practicing. Did you two see that? That's not what I'm going to share right now, but okay. But everyone was playing. Iguodala was practicing. Draymond was practicing. James Wiseman was putting up shots. The whole team was there. Klay Thompson was shooting. It was ambrosia for Dub Nation. I was personally loving it. So props to CJ Holmes for that. But this soundbite, courtesy of Anthony Slater, he posted this on his Twitter account. This was, again, this is Jordan Poole addressing questions from the media. Here we go.
What do you think kind of needs to happen to get you going a little bit more offensively?
Continue to keep playing?
We talked a lot about how Clay's return has maybe changed a little bit. How has Draymond's absence, has that also impacted the way that maybe the things that people are asking you to do or just what you have to do?
I mean, Draymond's a big part of our team. It's different not having him, so we just can't wait until he gets back.
Your role has fluctuated a ton this year. Does that have an impact on you?
I mean, you just got to kind of find a way to play through it.
Do you care starters coming off the bench? I mean, in situations, obviously, you don't play, don't play.
As long as I'm out there playing, it feels good.
Steve was talking a lot last night about how there was a lack of connectiveness. He saw that last night for the first time. Did you feel that as well? And what kind of, he said it was an intangible, but what plays into not having connectivity?
I think one of the vets mentioned it in the locker room. I mean, it's something that we got to just, fix internally, and get back to playing winning basketball.
What do you think has been the defensive issues team-wide recently, besides the fact that obviously Draymond's on there?
I think we know how good of a defensive team we are. We got to get back to playing our type of style.
Gentlemen, when an athlete clenches his jaw that much during an interview, you just know he's not happy and doesn't want to be there. What are your thoughts on Jordan Poole's interview yesterday and him overall?
My thought is that that's Jordan Poole. I mean, that's I've been a part of numerous media interview scrums with Jordan Poole where it's gone the exact same way. That's just kind of his rapport with the media. I mean, occasionally he's in a good mood and we'll give you a little bit longer of a soundbite, but his thing is that whenever he sits down with media, he says 90 seconds and he's going to give you 90 seconds. And, that's how long it's going to go. And I've never seen a young player in my time covering the NBA approach the media with that level of kind of annoyance and disdain.
Yeah.
Usually you get that from like an older guy, a guy who's been around the block for a while. But he's been like that since his rookie year. He does not like the media. He makes it well known. Never seen him have an extended sit down with anyone ever. I've tried to, and he cuts it off after a few minutes, and that's just how he rolls. So he is who he is.
Interesting. Dieter, you've had similar experiences in your time at Chase or wherever he is? He's nodding. Oh my God, I wonder why that is. Any clues? Is there any reason? Has he been burned before? Is he just cynical? What do you think it is?
Last one's probably the best guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's.
I have some personal thoughts on the matter. We will leave those.
Yeah, I don't want to get any personal shots at Jordan Poole.
Of course not. I'm not asking for that.
It is who this is just how he's always been.
He's consistent. You can't argue with consistency.
When he was not playing well. I remember he had one good game his rookie year before he went down to the G League in Miami. And it was like a really softball interview where we're just like, hey, you had a good game. What was working for you? And he was so annoyed the entire time, acting like we were, making fun of his mother or something. And it was like, okay, this is odd. Because he was obviously annoyed about all the negative attention he had gotten from media earlier in the season for not playing well.
Yeah.
And it's like you're getting negative attention because you're in the rotation, you're not playing well. So
what can Kerr do to improve Poole's production, if anything?
It's a great question, and it's one that needs to be consistently asked because the joke that I have, I don't know if Connor knows about this one, is I like to gauge how angry the fan base is by something I call the fire Kerr quotient, which is how much of my Twitter mentions are just people saying fire Steve Kerr as if that's going to fix something. And then I'll say what should he be doing different? Because legitimately, I'm not, you could never put me in charge of a basketball team. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. I like to learn about it. I'm learning something new every day. And I talk to people that I trust. I talk to former coaches or guys who I still view themselves as coaches, but don't have a good job in that regard right now. Who I pick their brains on stuff like this. And I legitimately ask people who are fire Kerr, what should he be doing? And most
that's
of the
what
time
I always ask too.
Yeah, and it's why don't they run more pick and roll? And it's here are 42 columns as to why they don't run pick and roll from a bunch of people. But that's a great question. What can you do to make Jordan Poole play better? I don't know.
That's one of the problems with Jordan Poole is he seems to play better as a starter, and there's just not a world where he can be a starter on this team.
He hasn't earned it now, right? That's the irony.
Yeah,
this is why I call this team front running. Jordan Poole's he has to prove that he's not a front runner. He has to prove that he can kind of burst through adversity. He came back last year. This time last year, the dude was a straight up bust. No ifs, ands, or buts about it.
I literally
he goes
didn't
to the G
think he was
League.
an NBA player.
I'm sorry.
You what?
I literally didn't think he was an NBA player.
And it was a very fair statement. He was just a dude who was all confidence and no results. Yep. And it was painful to watch.
Irrational confidence. Yes.
Yeah. And it was he goes down to the G League and they kind of put the towel of 0.5 on him. And I watched every G League game in the bubble last year. Jordan Poole was fine. He wasn't great. He wasn't wrecking these dudes. There was moments where you're oh yeah, there's something there. And then there was other moments where he would get he'd be running a one-man fast break one-on-one and pull up for three and airball it. I found one of those videos the other day talking to somebody that I hadn't talked to in a while. And one of the last texts that I had sent to them was that, like, yikes, Jordan Poole airball from the bubble. And he comes back, and truth be told, he was exactly what the Warriors needed at this time last year, because they were going to go small ball. They didn't really have anything but, energy and vibes and a little bit of youthful enthusiasm. And Jordan Poole was, for some reason, at the top of his biorhythms, and it all worked out. But they need him to be a professional now. They need him to be a pro. And so far, and he's 22 years old, I don't necessarily expect him to just have this all figured out. This is a very tough biz, a tough gig. But, like, he is being put in a position with some weight on it. And I haven't seen anything from him in a while now that indicates to me that he can carry a load, other than just, hey man, if things are going well, I'll be along for the ride. Sometimes, you got to step up, take it another level. I just haven't seen it as of late. I hope it comes around, because we know he has the offensive potential to do it.
They need him to be a reliable force in the playoffs. They need him to be a cog, a piece, an important piece in the playoffs. And that's going to be one of the most fascinating things, I think, to watch over the rest of the regular season is he ready for that type of opportunity? They need him to be. But if he's not, they're not going to just force him into it. They're going to figure something else out.
There you go. And he's Connor Letourneau. You could follow him on Twitter at CON_CHRON. Great work as always at the San Francisco Chronicle. Thanks for coming on with us today, Connor. And Dieter Kurtenbach, it's a pleasure for the week. You can follow him on Twitter at Dieter. I am on Twitter at DogSurfRoadshow. And tomorrow I will be recapping that Mavericks game. Let's hope for the best of Nation. Thank you, gentlemen. This was a great show as always. And we'll see you soon. Later, folks.
Thanks, Connor.